Mark Wahlberg had always been a man of contrasts, Hollywood superstar on one hand, working-class Boston kid at heart on the other. He had walked red carpets, produced films, and inspired audiences with stories of redemption. But nothing could have prepared him for the bright lights of the View studio that morning. When the cameras rolled, the conversation twisted, and tension filled the air like storm clouds waiting to burst. The show was meant to be routine. A press tour stopped to talk about his new faith-based film, a story close to his heart about resilience and second chances. Mark had done 100 interviews, but this one felt different. Whoopi Goldberg sat across from him, her eyes sharp with curiosity, her tone laced with a mix of challenge and authority. She respected him, sure, but she wasn't about to let him deliver his message without testing its strength. At first, it was cordial. They spoke of the film, the inspiration behind it, the people it aimed to uplift. But when the conversation turned to the power of faith and forgiveness, the air shifted. Whoopi leaned forward. "Mark, don't you think sometimes Hollywood romanticizes this whole second chance thing? Not everyone gets one. Not everyone should." The question hit harder than he expected. The studio quieted. Mark's jaw tightened. He remembered his past, the mistakes, the nights he wished he could rewrite, the long journey from a troubled youth to the man he had fought to become. He thought of the people who had forgiven him when he didn't deserve it, the mentors who had pulled him from darkness. "With all due respect, Whoopi," Mark said, his voice steady but charged, "I wouldn't be here if people believed no one deserved a second chance. If we stop believing in redemption, we stop believing in people." The exchange escalated, sparks of passion clashing between them. Viewers at home saw the heated debate, the tightening of Mark's tone, the sharp rebuttals from Whoopi. And then, in a moment that no one expected, Mark stood up. He pushed his chair back, shook his head, and muttered, "I can't do this." Cameras followed him as he walked off the stage, leaving a stunned silence behind. Gasps echoed through the studio. The headlines would later blare, "Mark Wahlberg walks off the View after fiery clash with Whoopi Goldberg." But what no one saw in that moment, what no headline would capture, was the storm raging inside him as he stepped outside the studio doors into the cool Manhattan morning. Mark's footsteps carried him into the city streets, past honking taxis and hurried New Yorkers who barely noticed the man beneath the baseball cap and leather jacket. He felt the heat of anger simmering in his chest, but beneath it was something deeper, sorrow. He wasn't angry at Whoopi. Not really. He was angry at himself, for letting emotion take over, for walking away from a conversation that could have mattered. He thought of the people who would watch that clip, who might think he had given up, who might see his walkout as arrogance rather than conviction. As he wandered, Mark's eyes landed on a small church tucked between towering buildings. Its doors were open, sunlight spilling across the worn wooden steps. Something pulled at him. Without thinking, he stepped inside. The hush of the sanctuary enveloped him, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. A few candles flickered near the altar. In the back pew sat an elderly man hunched over, his hands clasped tight, as though holding on to hope itself. Mark slid into a pew, staring at the cross before him. His thoughts raced. He had always carried his faith like a compass, but today it felt shaken. What good was his message if he couldn't even hold his ground with grace? Then he heard it, a soft sob. He turned and saw a young woman near the side aisle, clutching a toddler to her chest. Her clothes were worn, her face etched with exhaustion. She was whispering words he couldn't hear, tears sliding down her cheeks as she rocked the child. Mark hesitated, then approached slowly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. The woman looked up, startled. For a moment, she didn't recognize him, not as the movie star, but simply as a stranger offering concern. She wiped her eyes. "My son, he's sick," she whispered. "We've been in and out of the hospital. I lost my job trying to care for him, and I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Her words cut through him sharper than any clash on television. Here was real pain, raw and unfiltered. No cameras, no debates, just a mother on the edge of despair. Mark felt a lump rise in his throat. He thought of his own children, healthy and safe at home. He thought of the nights he had prayed for strength, the second chances that had carried him. And in that moment, he realized, maybe walking off that stage wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was the beginning of another one. He sat beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I don't know what you're going through completely, but I know what it feels like to think the world's too heavy. And I know help shows up in the most unexpected ways." The woman stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief, then recognition. "You're Mark Wahlberg," she whispered. Mark managed a small smile. "Today, I'm just someone who wants to help." In the hours that followed, Mark made calls. Not to his agent or his publicist, but to contacts who could connect the woman with resources, doctors, charities, foundations that provided medical support for families in crisis. He listened to her story, learned her son's name, Eli, and promised her she wouldn't have to carry the weight alone. By the time the sun dipped low, the woman's tears had shifted from despair to gratitude. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "You gave me hope again." Mark stepped back onto the street as twilight painted the city gold. The anger he had carried that morning was gone, replaced by a profound realization: sometimes the moments that break us are the very ones that redirect us toward where we're needed most. The next day, the media firestorm raged. Clips of his walkout looped endlessly, pundits debated his motives, and social media buzzed with criticism and defense alike. But Mark didn't rush to respond. He knew words alone wouldn't matter. Instead, he asked the View producers for a chance to return, not to promote his film, but to speak from the heart. To everyone's surprise, Whoopi agreed. When he walked back onto the stage days later, the atmosphere was tense but curious. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, half expecting another clash. But Mark leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. "Last time I was here, I let my emotions get the best of me," he began. "But walking away gave me perspective. It reminded me why I care so much about this topic. Because forgiveness, second chances, compassion, they're not just ideas. They're lifelines. Yesterday, I met a mother who thought she had no hope left. And I realized, our conversations, our disagreements, they matter, but what matters more is what we do when the cameras are off. How we show up for each other as human beings." The audience was silent, listening intently. Whoopi's expression softened. Mark continued, "I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to remind us all that kindness can change a life. It changed mine. And I believe it can change the world if we let it." The studio erupted in applause. Even Whoopi leaned back, a smile tugging at her lips. "Now that," she said, "is a conversation worth having." In the weeks that followed, Mark quietly worked with charities to launch a fund supporting families of children with critical illnesses. The story of the young mother and her son spread, not because he wanted credit, but because acts of compassion have a way of echoing louder than controversy. And somewhere in the city, a mother rocked her child with hope renewed, whispering prayers of gratitude for a stranger who became a lifeline. Mark Wahlberg's walkout would forever be remembered in headlines, but for him, the true story wasn't about a clash on live television. It was about what happened after, the reminder that humanity's greatest power isn't found in debate or division, but in the quiet, selfless acts that lift each other up. Because in the end, kindness walks farther than any walkout ever could.